How to control ADHD without medication? That's a great question, and you might be wondering if it's even possible. If that's you, then you've come to the right place because I'm here to answer that question in today's video. So let's dive right on in. Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Shockley, Doctor of Cause, Chiropractic, board certified in sports medicine, specialized in clinical nutrition. In this video, we're going to be answering the question, what foods make ADHD worse? With every single bite you're taking, you could either be improving overall brain health and function or making it worse. Then we'll discuss the top 4 nutrients that every ADHD sufferer should be supplementing with. And finally, I will be sharing with you a little known reason as to why you're continuing to suffer with lack of focus and concentration. Let's do this. What foods can make ADHD worse? We're actually going to be talking more specifically about what types of ingredients are being added to the foods that make ADHD worse. These, to summarize, are all of the additives, the emulsifiers, preservatives, all this stuff that they put into our foods to try to make it more palatable, give it a shelf life, make it look presentable and desirable. All this stuff is bad. So let me list out some that have been linked with being most detrimental for overall brain health and ultimately could be challenging your ADHD. The first one is sodium. Now, this is just sodium chloride, so not talking about Himalayan salt or Celtic sea salt that contains sodium in its raw form, like that's salt in the raw form. It's not just sodium whatsoever. But sodium itself, on its own, could be something that is challenging your ADHD. The next one is MSG. Most commonly, this is found in a lot of our Asian cuisines here in America. It gives it more flavor. So you could always, if you're going to eat out, ask if they use MSG. Most people are pretty familiar with this particular substance now. Definitely stay away from it. The next on the list is something known for short as HVP, hydrolyzed vegetable protein. I mean, honestly, that doesn't even sound like something we should be putting into our bodies. This is something that's designed to taste kind of like a bouillon without using any of the ingredients like your vegetables and your bones and the broth to create a bouillon. That's really gross. The next on the list is yeast extract. This is different from yeast because they got rid of the cell walls that make up yeast. So this is just the insides. Oh, weird. Then there's caffeine. Now, there's a little bit of kind of mixed reviews. Sometimes a smidgen of caffeine seems to help people focus and concentrate, but as a general overall rule of thumb, avoid caffeine. It's too stimulatory to the brain and can just imbalance the chemicals that much more. The next one are all of the artificial sweeteners. Now, when it says artificial, you should just run like the plague anyway. That means it was created in a lab, it's man-made, and ultimately, none of those things have proven very healthy for us. The brain is one of the most sensitive tissues to any and everything that you're putting in your mouth. So steering clear from artificial sweeteners and even flavorings would do you a lot of good. Then we've got the more commonly known food dyes. Did you guys know that over in Europe, the food dyes that we use readily in our food supply here, which are heavily targeted towards kids, like if you look at kids' food, it has food dye in everything. In Europe, their equivalent of our FDA has banned food dyes from all of their products. And in fact, if a company over there wants to produce something using a food dye, which in case you didn't know, those are those colors followed by numbers. So like red dye 40, yellow dye 5, that's what we're talking about. In Europe, if a company wants to put that into their product, they have to put a warning label on it that is similar to a Surgeon General's warning because they are so devastating to our health, specifically brain health. Major neurologic types of problems come about, when we're consuming these as kids. It creates different deficiencies in development. Then behavioral problems are super, super common, and there's a whole slew of other things that they can impact with your health. So everybody should be avoiding food dyes. They're not natural. We weren't meant to consume them. They're also tied with heavy metals, which are really devastating for brain health too. And the last guy on the list is the dreaded S word, sugars. I don't know if you've ever watched people behave like before sugar and after sugar. Everybody acts a bit differently. And why is that? Sugar is one of the best ways to produce inflammation in the body, and it goes everywhere. And as I was just mentioning, your brain tissue, the cells that make up the nervous system, are some of the most vulnerable to anything and everything in your environment and what you're ingesting. So when you put sugar in your system, it's like you're lighting your brain on fire. How can you focus and concentrate clearly if your brain is on fire? Now, I know I just went through these pretty quick, and it might take a little bit more research figuring out what you have in your household that contains these ingredients. But the easiest way to know where these products are found or where these additives are found is it's everything that's already processed, prepackaged, everything that you can buy in the aisles of the grocery store. That's where you will commonly find these ingredients. So the best rule of thumb for feeding your child with ADHD, yourself with ADHD, a loved one who's dealing with ADHD, or even helping out a friend, is to start only shopping in the perimeter of the grocery store, minus the bakery, because that's the sugar, and grains, which gluten actually creates some very interesting challenges for the brain as well, even if you're not sensitive to gluten. So shop in the perimeter. That's where our produce section is. Heavy on the veggies, okay? Super important for our health. And then we've got our meat department. As long as it's clean protein, awesome for you. The only aisle, honestly, that is kind of safe for you to enter would be where some of the oils are. And the only oils I would purchase from that section would be like avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and ghee. You'll find in the refrigerated section, kind of in the perimeter where the dairy is, your grass-fed butter, also super awesome. Oh, you'll get coconut oil in the aisle too. Those are your safe, healthy fats. It's the only aisle you should be entering in as much as possible. And if you shop with that in mind, you won't even have to worry about being exposed to these detrimental additives and emulsifiers and humectants and like stabilizers, all this chemical junk that they're putting in our food that really wreaks havoc on the overall health and function of your brain. Now, I'm really curious. Did you know that those types of ingredients really impact your ability to focus and concentrate? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you've avoided any of those, just comment which one it is so that I can see what people are doing. That's awesome. Thank you. Now, what are the top 4 nutrients that most people who are suffering with ADHD seem to be deficient in? Let's jump right into those. Number 1 would be your omega fatty acids, the omega-3s specifically. Part of this is because our diets here in America are much more loaded with omega-6s than they are omega-3s. Now, we need some omega-6s, but in super small amounts. Omega-6 fatty acids actually create inflammation. So again, brain on fire. Anytime you hear inflammation, think of fire inside of you, okay? Omega-3s are very anti-inflammatory, meaning they put out fires. We need a huge amount of those, and really it works best to supplement with a quality fish oil, or if you don't want to do fish, you can get omega-3 fatty acids from algae, but also like flaxseed oil. There are some alternatives for you. We can't get enough out of our diet alone. And how this relates to brain health is that your brain is predominantly made up of fat. They say anywhere from 70 to 80%, depending on what site you source. So if you're not getting these vital, critical building block nutrients in, especially if this is a kid that has ADHD, their brain is not going to develop the way that it should. It's absolutely necessary. In fact, my pregnant women, I put them on higher levels of DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids, during their pregnancy because it's so important for proper nervous system development of the baby while they are in the womb. But as an adult, we also need that same amount of omega-3 fatty acids being supplemented with, because again, we just can't get enough out of our diet alone anymore here in the US. And the sources that you could consume, predominantly we know fish. Depending on what fish you like, you may be exposing yourself to more heavy metals and doing more damage than reaping the reward of getting these omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're going to look for an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, there's something known as an IFOS, IFOS, IFOS certification. I encourage you to find a company that has the IFOS certification. What that tells you is specific to the batch of fish oil that you just purchased. You can get a rundown of everything they tested for and how that ranked. So whether it's heavy metals or it's radiation, thanks to more recent events that had happened in Japan years ago now, other contaminants, you can see exactly how it measured for the batch of fish oil that you're consuming. And it should be really, really low, of course. Otherwise, they're not going to put it out on the shelves. Looking for an IFOS certification, though, IFOS certification is not very easy to get. So you could feel safe that you're consuming or supplementing a clean omega-3 fatty acid from a company that is IFOS certified. Okay. So this is like one of the critical, probably one of the most common nutrient deficiencies that I see in my people who are suffering with ADHD. Okay. Number 2 would be the second most common deficiency that I see in all of my ADHD sufferers is vitamin D. Now, vitamin D, we know this to be super important for our bone and our teeth health. And because of recent events over the past year, we now recognize that vitamin D is crucial for proper immune system function. But it does so much more. In fact, one of the organs that uses the most amount of vitamin D or has the best ability to use vitamin D is the brain. I do regular blood testing on my patients near and far, and I always look at their vitamin D levels. And it's been really fascinating. All of my patients who've been diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, depression, bipolar, dyslexia, and then the other types of neurologic problems like multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, and probably about 95% of my actual migraine sufferers all have critically low levels of vitamin D in their system. I've yet to see anybody have normal levels. Okay. You cannot have normal brain function, which being able to focus and concentrate is a function of a healthy brain. You can't have that if you don't have enough vitamin D in your system. Vitamin D, Dr. Google will say it's like 46% of Americans are deficient in it. 95% of my patients are deficient in vitamin D. And I live in Colorado where we have sunshine 300 days out of the year. So why are so many people deficient in vitamin D? We've been cultured to believe that when we go out into the sun, we need to like lather up in sunblock to protect us from skin cancer. We have an ability to produce vitamin D from the sun's rays. But if you're putting sunblock on, you're blocking the ability for those rays to penetrate into our body and actually convert the substance that we need to be converted into usable form of vitamin D. So that could be part of it. Okay. We also are far more covered when we go outside. We may not necessarily be outside as long as what we should be. And if you are not at like peak hours where the sun's right up overhead and you're exposing as much skin as possible, legally possible, you're not going to be able to rely on the sun alone. So it's important to supplement with vitamin D, though there is a caution. I strongly suggest. In fact, in my office, nobody's allowed to do vitamin D unless you've tested your vitamin D level and you know what your current level is, because it is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning it can accumulate and you can get too much of in your system. Now, it takes an awful lot, but it is a life or death type of a situation when you get into toxic levels of vitamin D, because as vitamin D levels really raise, they will actually pull calcium back out of your bones and put it in your blood. Too much calcium in your blood can lead to kidney failure and worse, heart attack. So you want to know what your vitamin D level is before you start supplementing with it. Nutrient number 3 that not even just my ADHD sufferers are deficient in, but 80% of America is actually deficient in, it is magnesium. Now here's the thing, not all magnesium is created equally. And ultimately what I mean by that is there are different forms of magnesium and they're not all going to be able to benefit your brain health. There is only one form of magnesium that has been proven to be able to make it into your brain, because guess what? Your brain has this protective barrier known as the blood-brain barrier. Think of it as like army men standing single file, arms locked, not letting anybody into the brain unless they have special access. That's how that works. So unless you're taking what is called magnesium L-threonate, you're not necessarily going to get the full benefit that you could from supplementing with a magnesium supplement. Okay? Magnesium, in addition to proper brain function, it makes up 1/3 of every single cell in your body. It's required for 80% of all the biochemical processes that happen 24/7. Muscles need it, brain needs it, heart needs it, like you name it, you need more magnesium. So the easiest way to do that is to supplement with magnesium L-threonate, and then also add in magnesium-rich foods. If you like oysters, have at it. They're the most nutrient-dense source of magnesium. But if you're like me and you're not a big fan, then go for those raw pumpkin seeds, also known as pepitas. Sprinkle them on a salad with dark leafy greens, and you'll be doubling down on your magnesium intake, and eat that regularly. Nutrient number 4 is B6. B6 is one of those water-soluble B vitamins that your nervous system is completely dependent upon in order to produce all those neurotransmitters, the brain chemicals that all the messaging in that happens on. If you don't have enough B6, you will not be producing enough of serotonin, dopamine, or norepinephrine. It also can affect GABA and so many different things that then don't allow you to sleep well at night, and very much so can manifest in challenges with regulating behavior. It is really fascinating. Like B6, you could just be a little bit deficient in, and it will have significant effects. So B6 is another nutrient that you could add in really easily. There's a little bit more safety with using B6 because it is water soluble. So it's much more difficult to get a toxicity issue from B6. With B vitamins, I always try to find B vitamins that are methylated, which ultimately means that they are active. They're in the form that the body can just use so that they don't have to be converted or go through all these different chemical processes in order to be in the usable form, which will ultimately make your body use the B6 that you're putting in that much better. Now, before I get into the little known reason why you're still struggling with lack of focus and concentration, I just want to remind you to subscribe to my channel down below and turn those notifications on. I am dropping videos every Monday through Friday, all around brain health, gut health, everything that you need to know in order to achieve what I like to call total body mastery. And I don't want you to miss out on another episode. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn the notifications on, and you will be good to go. All right. Let's talk about this little known reason you're still struggling with lack of focus and concentration. What in the world am I talking about? Well, this is a little controversial topic as well, but it's something known as EMF sensitivity. EMF stands for electromagnetic frequency sensitivity. Now, because you're dealing with somebody who has ADHD or you have it yourself, you may have been a little bit aware of this, but this is something that has become so much more of a problem, partly because we have more and more technology that is surrounding us. You see, what happens with EMF is with how our bodies respond to it, we can become kind of sensitive. Or it might just be we have an abundant around us and the body has to interact with that all the time and it stresses it out. That can manifest in very different ways. In fact, I see very commonly people who have digestive problems that work in an environment where they're in cubicles still and they've got technology and Wi-Fi and all this stuff happening all around them. They have major digestive problems. Seems to be one of the systems that is very negatively impacted by it. With that said, you can't affect the digestive system without affecting the brain. Now, with EMF, we've got a couple of different things. It's not just the EMF, but it's also the blue light that comes from these devices that people seem to be on all of the time. And guess what? The kids, they're far more sensitive to it than the adults. But by no means were we supposed to be connected to technology 24/7. I can tell you, I have a son. He does not have ADHD, though if you didn't know him, you might want to label him that way. He's intense. He's a boy. He's 9.5 and he's super busy. But here's the thing. When he was young, occasionally, I am a single mom and I had to get some things done and I needed to keep him contained and happy. So what did I do? As any parent does nowadays, we may turn on an iPad and have him watch a show or do something with technology. It's become the pacifier of today's world, which is not great. My parents have said like, what did we used to do for you guys when you were misbehaving or you were throwing a fit and we had to get stuff done? It was definitely not technology because we didn't have any of that. But here's the point. I have noticed with my kid, and even still, now that he's 9.5, if he is on his iPad or connected to some form of technology for any great length of time, actually, there's a couple of things that I notice. His earlobes will get really red. Something that's really fascinating, especially with children, whether it's food or its environment or now technology, EMF, earlobes going red are a sign of a sensitivity. Fascinating, right? You can also see like bags under the eyes. And this is not just specific to kids. You just see it more easily in kids, partly because who looks at their own earlobes on a regular basis? You may feel hot or flushed. That could be a sign as well for you that your body's had enough. It's like overheating. It's overreacting to whatever you've been stimulating it with. So I would notice that about my son. And that's something I still pick up on. I very much so try to limit his screen time. The other thing, though, that was fascinating was the very first thing that I was aware of, and believe me, he does not sit on an iPad for hours, is that he has crazy nightmares at night. My son has an amazing imagination. He's incredibly smart, if I do say so myself, but it's too stimulating. And that's exactly what the blue light and EMF can do, is it like hyperstimulates the brain. So now when you need your kid to go to bed, they're gonna have a hard time falling asleep. Or for you yourself. Research has already shown if you don't sleep well at night, one of the things you should be doing is getting unplugged. They say 2 hours before you go to bed because it's too stimulatory to the brain. You're not going to be able to calm yourself to fall into a nice deep sleep. So if this is not something that you have really spent any time investigating, I would do a little bit of experimenting with this. If this is for you, not your kid necessarily, maybe make sure you're not on technology. I would say at least a half hour before you go to bed, even though science says 2 hours. If you can do the 2 hours, do the 2 hours, but at least a half hour. You got to let your brain unplug from what it's been being exposed to and processing and managing. Okay. For your kiddo, I would definitely do the 2 hours. Then there are other ways that you can decrease your amount of EMF exposure that may seem a little inconvenient, but actually are really helpful for not, impacting your health in a negative way. These days and times where we had all these wireless keyboards and mice, these guys, you know what I'm talking about, right? Anything that's wireless is going to output more EMF. So our AirPods, and anything that has to do with a computer. If you can tolerate it, get a corded version. It will decrease the amount of EMF that you're being exposed to because it's traveling all around us with all of the internet and the Wi-Fi and what have you. So start reducing EMF exposure and see if all of a sudden your brain starts to come back online and you are being able to focus and concentrate more. Now, if you're sitting there still stumped on okay, she said just to eat at the perimeter of the grocery store minus the bakery, which is all of the breads and crackers and stuff, and don't go into the aisles, which are where all the convenience foods are, things that are nice to have on hand. How in the world am I supposed to eat? And what are the foods that I could be eating that maybe contain more of those nutrients that I shared with you that were so lacking? Then don't waste another moment on that thought. In the description below, there is a link for a 7-day Eat Your Way to Better Brain Health meal plan. Now, this is totally free, so just click the link. You'll get immediate access. And this was designed for people who maybe don't necessarily enjoy cooking or want to spend all of their free time in the kitchen. It's also designed for people who are super busy that don't have time to cook, even if they wanted to. What I mean by that is this meal plan has plandovers in it. You're not cooking from scratch every single meal, because I have tried many meal plans where that was the case. And yeah, right, that's not going to happen in my world whatsoever. So I designed this for all of you guys in mind. I also have included your grocery list and then easy peasy, limited ingredient recipes that don't take much time to cook. So again, you can live life and not just be stuck in your kitchen. So just look down in the description below for that link. It's the 7-day Eat Your Way to Better Brain Health meal plan, and you will get instant access. I appreciate you so much. Hopefully you found today's video helpful. Let me know down below. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next video. God bless.